Good morning, everyone. It is January the 29th, so it is Thursday. We're about halfway through the week here. And what we've got as of Wednesday night over the Northwest was some moderate to, in some ways, heavy rainfall over the Olympics and the Cascades in Washington State. But in Seattle, we had mainly light rain, anywhere from a tenth to a quarter inch overnight. And we're kind of seeing that not only Wednesday night, but also Thursday morning, Thursday night, and then even another round of rain Friday morning. Anywhere between an inch and a half total through the week here in Seattle. We'll kind of get into rainfall and snowfall totals over the Northwest. But you can kind of clearly make out here, you can go as far south as Portland, basically, in Oregon. But for much of the rest of the West, especially south of Oregon here into California, dry conditions dominate. And this has to do again with the very strong ridging pattern we've had over the west. Even still over the Intermountain West, we've had temperatures well below freezing in many locations. This trough over the east has been in place for weeks now and looks to continue to be in place the rest of this week. Two other areas here over the Dakotas and Montana is one area. We're seeing some light snow shower activity Thursday morning. And again, maybe 1 to 3 inches of snowfall in some locations here. But as far as major areas of precipitation over the Northeast, as we go into western New York, there is a band of snowfall that's delivering anywhere from 5 to 10 inches of snow to Oswego Wednesday night, and likely an additional at least 4 to 8 inches, I would say, as we get into Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon. Maybe storm total anywhere between 10 and 18 inches of snow in that area. Lesser amounts are occurring near Buffalo. Again, more like 2 to 4 inches total between now and tomorrow morning. But we're seeing that lake effect snow machine really die down in recent weeks. It's not as strong as what we were seeing maybe a week or even 2 weeks ago. And a lot of this might be due to the lakes freezing over. And maybe that's something we can look at in the next video, how that could be impacting snowfall rates and totals over the Great Lakes region. And then as we zoom this out a little bit further, we can see the temperatures in general over the United States. And one thing that should stick out to you is, okay, we got single digits, right, in much of the Northeast and Midwest. And then we have 20s down into much of the South. And even if we go down to Jacksonville, Florida, even near Tallahassee, Florida, we have temperatures in the low 30s. And you can see how the upper 20s are getting into northern Florida here. So that cold air is really pushed down towards the Gulf states here. And we'll probably have another reinforcing shot as we get into late week. I wanted to start in the Northwest in terms of looking at the forecast for the next few days. And when we look at the Northwest, we have moderate to heavy rainfall that's moving in Wednesday night, Thursday morning. And snowfall levels between now and Thursday morning will probably range between 5,000 and 6,000 feet. So these passes here and the Cascades will likely see a good deal of snow. Again, maybe 5 to 10 inches of snow in some places of the northern Cascades. But again, it's limited to mainly Washington State and northwestern portions of Oregon, this rainfall that we're seeing. As far as rainfall goes, again, about a tenth to a quarter inch, pretty much for each 12-hour period, whether we're talking about Wednesday night, Thursday morning, even into, let's say, Thursday night. And this will add up over the next several days. We actually had periods of rain through the weekend and into early next week in Washington State. But will be confined to the upper Northwest. Locations in southern Oregon down through much of California will remain dry and warm through the rest of the week. Now, as we take this forward beyond Thursday, again, we can see the rainfall coming back in Thursday night, a little bit more mountain snowfall at the same time in the Cascades. And still again, as we get into the weekend, Friday night into Saturday morning, another round of rain and snow. It looks like as we get into Saturday afternoon, into Saturday night, there will be a break for the area. So dry conditions up and down the west coast for much of the day Saturday. There is another round of rain, lighter amounts of rain coming in Sunday. This will be confined to coastal regions, though, for both Oregon State and Washington State when it does come through. I did want to show, like, as we get into Monday, there is an additional chance of rain. Each storm that kind of passes through, you can kind of tell the trend. It's trending further and further north with time. And we're going to see stronger ridging build into the northwest, and pretty much for all the west coast in general as we get into the middle of next week. All signs are pointing towards Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week being dry from California to Washington State. Now, beyond this point, it's hard to tell when the ridging will finally break down in the west. It looks like you guys will be having mild temperatures up and down the coast, at least through next week. But rainfall should be confined to, let's say, Vancouver and points north. The storm track is really going to be shifting further and further north with time. Now, as far as precipitation totals for the northwest, we can see how the heavier rain is confined to the shoreline. Whether we're looking at northwestern Oregon, anywhere from, let's say, 1.5 to 2 inches of rain along the coast. And then as we go into Washington State, those totals do increase from, let's say, 2 to maybe 3 inches of rain in total, especially as you get into the Ritter portions here on the map. Again, that's likely in the Olympic range, what we're seeing there, so in the higher elevations. Now, in the city of Seattle, we have anywhere from 1 inch to 1.5 inches of rain this week that can be expected. No flooding really expected with this. It's so well spread out, the rainfall. Again, we were seeing that 12-hour period of maybe 1/10 to 1/4 inch. And then we see another batch of rain that delivers the same amount. And each successive system, of course, will add up to that total. But in general, many of these systems that pass through the area will deliver light rain to much of Washington State and northwestern portions of Oregon. Now, as we move into the day Friday, we see the trough itself begin to move further down south into the Gulf. And as it does so, we have this general west to east flow at the southern end of the trough. And any storm system that develops on that southern end, and we can kind of see one here to the south of Louisiana, will likely just pass off to the east with time, unless the trough and its position changes over time. One thing we'll notice here also is there's another piece of energy coming out of the Dakotas. There's another piece of energy over Kentucky and the Virginias, right, at this time. And if you look at the map right now, it kind of looks like those pieces of energy are all kind of disconnected. And when we look at the thickness lines in the troposphere, indicated by these dash lines, let's say, for instance, I wanted to look at these blue dash lines in the Dakotas, they have a general curvature to them, right? They can start off in the north, they kind of curve down to the south, and then eventually the southeast with time. So some northward flow, but also some west to east flow. Now, what we want to see with time is these lines of thickness actually align from north to south. Let's say from Canada down to Texas. And they call that meridional flow. And when you have that set up, that is additional energy that can go into a low pressure system. And typically, something downstream will pop up. Something to, let's say, the south and east of the trough. So in this particular instance, south and east of the trough would be somewhere off the coast of the Carolinas. And another thing too is the trough itself has to be positioned differently. We're going to have to see the trough more or less align north to south down to Texas, go over the Gulf states, right over the Gulf of Mexico, and then curve up the Atlantic coast along the Atlantic seaboard. So we'll have to see the trough reposition. We'll have to see these lines of thickness line up in a meridional, and this will provide energy for a low pressure system downstream. But there are other factors in place that need to be there to not only develop the low pressure system, but keep it going. But let's see if this actually pans out where the trough is in the right location and we do get those lines to line up vertically, right, to have that meridional flow. So over time, as we go from Friday morning into Saturday morning, and hopefully this is becoming apparent and becoming clear, we'll notice that the blue lines kind of line up in a way where once again we have basically this meridional flow, right? I'm going to kind of just reinstate this here where you're seeing those blue dashed lines, that north to south flow from Canada to Texas. Again, that's going to provide that energy for downstream as of Saturday morning. But then also we can see where we have the trough itself dipping into the Gulf of Mexico, and then it pulling back towards the East Coast along the coastal Carolinas. And we're seeing the development now of a low pressure system. Let's just go ahead and highlight that here off the coast of Cape Hatteras. Another key factor is to see a high pressure system to the west of the low pressure. And we actually have that here. If we look over the state of Texas and Oklahoma, and the main takeaway here is when you see that kind of alignment, that allows the low pressure to strengthen further over time. And indeed, as we move forward, let's just kind of erase what we have here. You can see how the low pressure goes from about 1,000 millibars to 985 and then 976. And when you hear people refer to the system as bombing out or bombogenesis, it's when a low pressure drops 24 millibars in 24 hours. Now, the reason this low pressure is forming the way it is and bombing out is that we have all the right pieces in place. Like we just mentioned, we have that high pressure located to the west of the low pressure, allowing for that strengthening to take place. A lot of that has to do with the flow of winds around each system. Another thing that we have in place that we just mentioned is that meridional flow, right? From north to south, from Canada to Texas on the back end of that trough. The trough itself is in the right location, right? We have something set up east of the Rockies, dipping into the Gulf of Mexico, and then wrapping up east of the Atlantic coastline. And all of that is ideal for the development of a strong low pressure system. The final piece of the puzzle here that kind of drives the developing low pressure system is having a strong temperature gradient along the coast. All right, so one of the important things I want to point out here is when we look at the temperatures Friday afternoon, the temperature gradient is such that we go from 20s to maybe 40s off of the Carolina coast. And yeah, that's a pretty strong temperature gradient already, but this is going to actually increase with time as we get into Saturday. So as we move from Friday morning towards Saturday morning, you'll notice something changes. We have this area of yellow and orange actually move up towards the Carolina coast. And meanwhile, the temperatures along the Carolina coast remain that blue color, right? So temperatures below freezing. And by the time we get to 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, we have these really cold temperatures over eastern Carolina, getting into the 20s in some instances. And then just off the coast there of Cape Hatteras, we have temperatures in the 60s. So nearly a 40-degree temperature change within a very small area. When you have that in place, that's something that's going to supply the necessary energy and flow around that low pressure system to maintain growth. So you might ask yourself, okay, what happens when that changes, right? It's likely not going to stay that way forever. In fact, when the low pressure system develops, it begins to break down that temperature gradient over time. So looking at this same time period, we're seeing this strong low pressure system off the coast of Cape Hatteras. So let's clear what we have on the map. And as I step this forward, I'm going to stop it here. And this is as of Sunday morning at 7 a.m. I'm going to point out the line of 540 because that's the line typically between rain and snow. But it also indicates what's happening to the storm system. So we can see that red line there, and that kink that we're seeing there is actually a breakdown in the temperature gradient itself. In fact, from the north and west, we have these cold temperatures overrunning the low pressure system. And when it does that, it breaks down the temperature gradient and also begins to change the winds around the low pressure system. So the mechanisms that were driving the development of the low pressure system are now also the mechanisms that are breaking it down. So when a low pressure like this forms, it typically forms for a day, maybe two, and then it begins to break down. So the strongest precipitation shield that forms usually forms immediately when the storm first gets going. And we can see that strong shield of moisture just to the north and west of the developing storm. But over time, again, you kind of see how that becomes more broken until a new low pressure system forms off of Nantucket. And more or less what we're getting here is two areas of development. We get this development initially over North Carolina, right, with the heavy snowfall there, maybe in eastern portions of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. But then we get this secondary area of development off the coast of Massachusetts. So what we could potentially end up with is two areas of very heavy snowfall this weekend. So currently the European model is showing anywhere from about 3 to 6 inches in southern Virginia. Wherever you see the lighter blue, or the lightest blue on the map here, that's 3 inches of snow. And you can see how that area of blue covers a large area of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, even eastern portions of Georgia. So this will be a major snowstorm for people that don't normally see it. And then also further to the north, we can see where we have another large area near Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, southern portions of Maine. And this could be a heavier area of snowfall that develops off the coast of Massachusetts. So places like Nantucket, right, could easily pick up over a foot of snow. Now this is just one model. The GFS model is showing way more, 1 to 2 feet even over the Carolinas. I'm not completely on board with those totals yet, but I do think we could see a general 6 to 12 inches over North Carolina and South Carolina. So let's just kind of pinpoint where we think a bullseye is going to be. I think anywhere over the North Carolina and South Carolina Piedmont could receive that heavy snow. But then we have another area of 6 to 12 inches that is going to cover anywhere from southern Maine, much of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. And that eastern portion of that block I just drew could see over a foot of snow easily. So in general, I would say this storm taking place over the Carolinas is about a 50% chance now. So I'm going to go ahead and say 50% chance of this storm taking place in the Piedmont of North Carolina and South Carolina. Again, portions of southern Virginia are going to be involved. Eastern Georgia are going to be involved. It will just be to a lesser extent. I do believe we have about a 30% chance of this happening up here in New England. And this will probably grow with time where, yeah, we have a more likely scenario over New England. I'm just a bit more skeptical because it involves the development of a secondary low pressure system off the coast of Nantucket. And that's going to be highly dependent on the low pressure developing over the Carolinas. So because of that, there is a bit more uncertainty in the amount of snow and whether we see it at all over New England. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video and my explanation about that low developing off the Carolina coast. And if you have any questions about what we discussed today, just leave those in the comments below. We'll be going live this weekend, likely on Saturday afternoon between 12 and 4. I'm anticipating snow over the Carolinas, and that will be a rare event for them where they could see 6 to 12 inches of snow. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and maybe I'll see you guys Saturday. Bye.